This week, the Supreme Court issues massive victories for parents and kids nationwide. The big, beautiful bill makes its way to Donald Trump's desk, and the striking difference between Republicans and Democrats in how they view the country. These stories and much more straight ahead on this Independence Day edition of The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review, and on behalf of all of us, I'll say up front, a happy Independence Day to everyone who's tuned in. Glad to have you along. Glad to have our panel along with us as well. Josh Mann, our managing editor. Melissa Oden, host of the Life Beyond Abortion podcast, part of the Herzog Podcast Network, and Adam Wittenberg, a staff writer here at The Lion. Let's dive right in. The big, beautiful bill. As we record this panel, Melissa, we start with you. They are inches, it sounds like, we think, from the House approving this thing, signing off on what the Senate agreed to, sending it to the president's desk. Trump said he wanted this as a gift to Americans by the 4th of July. Are you impressed it got here?
I'm impressed. It's historic. I think it's a good reminder that our votes always matter when we look at the vice president's vote, our members of Congress and leadership, and ultimately the administration. It truly is historic.
Josh, we and a little later in the show, we'll play some clips of some Democrats who are obviously not very excited about it. But this took some doing, not just from Democrats who were opposed, but some Republicans too.
Yeah, not a lot of sleep has been had there on the Hill. Last week, I talked to a Senate staffer and a House representative staffer from Missouri. Both of them seemed like they thought this isn't going to happen. It's unlikely, maybe in August. But here we are, and it looks like it's going to happen. They flipped votes overnight. I don't know how these people survive on so little sleep, particularly the 79-year-old president. But apparently he said he had a call with Putin at 10 a.m. this morning as well. And so I don't know what other world problems he might solve on his way to this big, beautiful bill signing, which apparently they've also scheduled for the morning.
He's on a roll, Adam, no doubt about that, which we will also talk about a little later in the show. But bottom line, he is holding all the cards, and so Republicans who would hold out before, and some of them threatened to earlier, it seems like they're falling in line now.
Yeah, it's very impressive political maneuvering, like Melissa was saying, to see the Republicans actually deliver on their promise and get this to the president's desk by the 4th of July. And one of the things we care about a lot here at the Herzog Foundation is educational freedom and school choice. And so I just want to note that there is a national school choice provision in the big, beautiful bill, and that is a win overall for educational freedom.
That's a great point. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas put that back in the bill as I last read it in the Senate and back over to the House. So, yeah, big opportunity for school choice for all states, which is great. And I know we'll continue to cover it at readlion.com. Let's pivot to the Supreme Court, who also, there was some big stuff since we gathered last. There was a ruling on judicial injunctions. They basically struck that down. But also, you're following, Josh, at readline.com, what is now the Supreme Court asking that all issues related to transgender surgeries and whatnot for minors be reviewed.
Yeah, there's been two new developments after the Supreme Court ruled in favor of a Tennessee law that banned treatments for basically gender-altering treatments for minors. Now the Supreme Court has said, first of all, in a number of cases, they need to be remanded to the lower courts. They need to be decided in light of the precedent the Supreme Court set. But just today, they've also agreed to hear two new cases in the future on this issue. And so it does look like it's going to be a win for those who've been defending women's rights, girls' rights, and the separation of sexes and sports and fairness and all of these things. And so the Supreme Court seems primed to rule in favor once again in favor of women's rights in sports.
And Melissa, these rulings from the Supreme Court, 6-3 last week, 6-3 this week as they wrap business up for their session, how big are these Supreme Court rulings?
I mean, again, the word is historic. I think Michael Ryan said it so beautifully to say, you know what, during this term, no one won more than American parents and their children. This is an impact we're going to see for generations to come.
And Adam, you mentioned, you were talking about this a little while ago, the Supreme Court weighing in on kids being taught by their parents. The Supreme Court actually says, yes, we're still putting a premium on that.
Yeah, folks, and you may not realize how significant this is and how much it sets America apart. I was privileged to study abroad in Europe for 1 year in Germany, and they actually have banned homeschooling. And many other European nations, they really actually put the state ahead of the parents at the end of the day. And I know that many on the left wing and far left have been trying to do that. They don't like parental rights. They don't like freedom. They don't like that you can be excluded from their system and their indoctrination camps. And yet, the Supreme Court, which we largely owe to Trump's first term appointing conservative justices, stood up and said no. The parent is the primary person that raises the child ahead of the state. That's how it should be. But folks, if we don't continue to stand up for this, there are strong forces, even global forces, trying to make America just like other places. And that is not a good thing, but it requires vigilance. So we celebrate, but be aware this is a victory that will need to be defended.
Yeah, and to Adam's point, Josh, I think we covered it last week on the show, maybe not, but Sonia Sotomayor in the dissenting opinion on the LGBTQ literature in schools, the 6-3 ruling, thankfully, said that parents can withdraw their children from curriculum that they disagree. But Sonia Sotomayor, writing in the dissenting opinion, said that schools, public schools, almost have a duty, a civic duty to expose your children to things you may not want them exposed to.
Yeah, and I hope that parents are listening to that. It's scary stuff. Alito said, "We've long recognized the rights of parents to direct the religious upbringing of their children." And of course, for about 100 years, there was a big case, the early 20th century, where the Supreme Court recognized the parental rights, and we can't get away from that. And, parents need to be paying attention. Know what's going on in your public schools. Be involved if you're sending your kids there. And I would say consider alternative forms of education. Make sure you understand what's happening. But a great win for parents' rights.
Melissa, just spending a little more time on that, the idea that there are 3 Supreme Court justices who conclude public schools have some sort of responsibility to children who are raised in religious homes to expose them to things their parents may not want them exposed to.
I think we have always known what the playbook looks like for progressivism. And to speak to what, Josh is saying, this is when people need to look at these rulings and see them as a pattern. These are not outliers. The playbook is very clear. They would like us to become like other nations. And I think, again, that's what makes America so special and why Trump was such a threat, because he can restore America to who we have always been.
And the great alternatives. We talk a lot about this at readline.com, and the Herzog Foundation stands for this very, very thing. A story, Adam, about a woman who has become so passionate about alternative forms of education. She was a homeschool mom who's now created a tuition-free opportunity for some students.
Yes, this is an amazing story. At times, it moved me to tears as I was writing it, because Robin Corey is a woman in Oklahoma City who has created what might be the only school in the nation specifically for children of the incarcerated. And studies have shown that when parents get locked up, children immediately begin to suffer in school and decline in learning. They have all kinds of extra needs. I mean, these are the needy and the broken. And I highly recommend you go and read the story of how God moved in her life. She was a homeschool mom, but planted a seed 20 years later, kind of brought it to life. And now she has a thriving, beautiful school in Oklahoma helping these specific children.
That's also at readline.com. And we'll wrap this segment, Melissa, with what I'm sure had to have you specifically as a lady on the panel pretty enthused when the University of Pennsylvania had to confess, okay, all right, we're going to apologize to our female swimmers who may have suffered at the hands of biological men competing and beating them in those sports.
Oh, there's a lot I could say. I mean, I think we finally figured out how people can really determine who a woman is. I mean, I guess it's the threat of, the loss of federal funding. It's not a textbook biology definition. A little, motivation, I guess, we found is what helps them determine who a woman is. Fascinating.
and probably a little money you might lose as well. All right, quick break. And when we return here on The Lion Week in Review, a look at the sights and sounds on Capitol Hill and cable news when The Lion Week in Review rolls on. Welcome back to The Lion Week in Review. We're back with our panel, Melissa, Josh, and Adam, our 4th of July Independence Day edition. And I thought, as we looked at the sights and sounds on cable news this week, there was a bright white line of division, more so than maybe ever before, between Democrats and Republicans. We start with some Democrats and their opposition to the big, beautiful bill. Congresswoman Jayapal.
I just can't emphasize how I mean, I'm getting calls, and in the airports, people come up to me when they recognize me, and they're sobbing on my shoulder because they know that so many people, whether it's people who are delivering babies, 60% of births in Mike Johnson's home state of Louisiana paid for by Medicaid, or whether it's, seniors in nursing homes, or whether it's folks with disabilities, those are the people that are going to be so incredibly hurt by this cruel betrayal of a bill.
And Senator Chuck Schumer was even more direct about how much danger this bill would pose on Americans.
Good afternoon. Today, Senate Republicans betray the American people and cover the Senate in utter shame. They betrayed the American people and covered the Senate in utter shame. In one fell swoop, Republicans passed the biggest tax break for billionaires ever seen, paid for by ripping away health care for millions of people and taking food out of the mouths of hungry kids. This is not a big, beautiful bill at all. That's why I moved on the floor to strike the title. It is now called The Act. That's all it's called. But it is really the big, ugly betrayal, and the American people know it.
Yeah, he went on to say we're all going to die. Literally, we're all going to die. Melissa, so it's not a secret Democrats don't want this bill to pass, but people weeping and crying and Democrats claiming other Republicans are whispering in private, oh, we hope you'll stand up and do something to stop this. Do you believe any of that?
Show me the numbers. I mean, tell me the names of the people who are crying on your shoulder. I would really love to know that.
Josh, the big, beautiful bill passage without the help of Democrats, I don't think that's a secret. Are they hurting themselves in their opposition to it?
I think they could be, because if we see the kinds of success, I mean, we've seen so far in the Trump administration, some of the things that are promised by the bill, for one thing, continued tax cuts made permanent, more border enforcement. I mean, these are things that are polling well. Then I think you're going to see, hey, this is pretty good, actually. And clearly they're exaggerating. They're trying to score political points. But the truth is that only there will be some under Medicaid affected, but that's targeting waste, fraud, and abuse. Most of those 60% of births in Louisiana paid for by Medicaid will continue to be paid for by Medicaid.
And the issue of illegal immigration, something Trump has made a priority, building the wall, that's also in the bill. And something this week got a lot of attention, what they call alligator Alcatraz. Joy Reid had this to say about that.
Ron DeSantis is still governor of Florida. He took the Comfy Couch hosts on a tour of the concentration camp that he's building in Florida in order to round up brown people, and throw them in a camp because he doesn't want them in Florida.
And at CNN, they were helping promote a new app for people that want to avoid ICE.
One tech developer is pushing back with an app designed to track ICE activity in real time. It's called Ice Block, and it's controversial to say the least. Senator Claire Duffy is with us now. How does this work, Claire, and what are the legal implications?
Yeah, John, I talked with Joshua Aaron, who is the longtime tech worker who developed this platform, and he said he really wants it to be an early warning system for people about the location of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement officers. So he says he does not want people interfering with those officers' activity, but he does want people to be able to avoid them altogether if they want. So you open the app, it looks like a map, and users can tap the map to report an ICE sighting in their area, and then everybody who uses the platform within 5 miles of that sighting will get a push alert.
So, Adam, this is an 80-20 issue. Poll after poll shows it. Alligator Alcatraz is a concentration camp. CNN promoting apps to help people evade law enforcement. How's that going to play?
Yeah, not well. I think one of the things we see in the biased media is when a Republican does something that maybe a Democrat used to do, suddenly it has a bad connotation, right? Have you heard the phrase, oh, he put kids in cages? That's what they said when a Republican was locking up immigrants. But under Obama, they were in the exact same cages, and it was just, oh yeah, this is just detention, or I don't know what term they used. So that's what's going on here. This is not a concentration camp. It's a simple detention center. We've had them. We had them under Obama. We even had them under Joe Biden. So this is bias in the media. And about that app, I have heard reports of people kind of playing it a different way, where they go in and file fake ICE sightings to kind of clear certain areas of illegal immigrants. So it's sad that CNN is reporting this. It's sad that these things exist. Why are people so against the government simply doing its job of enforcing the laws, which include the immigration laws in this country?
And Josh, as a journalist, just quickly, CNN literally promoting an app that says, here's how you can evade legal authorities. Your thoughts on that as a journalist, if CNN continues to claim they are?
Yeah, that's a really interesting play by them. And I think it's kind of sad to see the media basically sharing more anti-law enforcement messaging, which I think we've seen it really happening for the last 5 years, and I think the tide is starting to turn on that. But the immigration area, we're still seeing a lot of that happen. It's concerning.
And of course, we're looking ahead to 2026. Democrats would love to get back in control. The Raging Cajun, James Carville, had this summary of what he thinks is coming for the midterms.
People tell you they're worried about the midterms, and you say you should be, because there's a good chance that Trump will try to pull something. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I don't know. What I think is going to happen is Virginia and New Jersey are going to be Democratic blowouts. And I think he's going to read the election records. By the way, there are more people that live in Virginia and New Jersey than live in New York City. And we ought to talk also, we talk about things that happen in New York City. We should talk about we got Sterling candidates also in Virginia and New Jersey. And I think he's going to see this big, beautiful bill is about 25 points underwater. It's going to be 30 points underwater. He's going to see a massive defeat coming, and he's going to try to do anything he can to extricate himself from that defeat. And I would not put it at all past him to try to call martial law or declare that there's some kind of national emergency in the country or anything like that, because the hoof prints are coming. You can hear them, and they're going to get a shellacking in November of 2026.
Well, he also predicted a shellacking for President Trump from Kamala Harris, and we see how that turned out. Harry Enton over at CNN, Melissa, also had this summary on polling specific to Democrats, and one of the big issues out there right now, how shocked he is at what they've embraced.
Who Democrats sympathize more with, Israelis or Palestinians? In 2017, the Democratic Party was a pro-Israeli party. Look at this. They sympathized with the Israelis by 13 points, more with the Israelis than the Palestinians. But look at this sea change. Now Democrats sympathize more with the Palestinians by 43 points. Oh, my God. That is a change in the margin of 56 points over the course of just 8 years. So all of a sudden, it's the pro-Palestinian position that actually reigns supreme in Democratic politics.
So that's my overarching question, Melissa, is are the Democrats on the right track for this big blowout James Carville claims is coming?
I think in terms of blowout, they blew out a tire, and probably all 4 tires on their vehicle. If that's the blowout we're talking about, sure, that's the blowout they're going to get.
Josh, again, from the big, beautiful bill, which I just asked you about, what we were just talking about with Adam, and the concentration camp talk, the transgender stuff, the Palestinian stuff. I'm not saying the Democrats can't win, but are they on the right track right now in terms of public opinion?
Doesn't seem so. I don't think they know what track they even want to take. We've been reporting on some of the problems within the party, problems fundraising, even leadership, and disagreements about who's going to lead the way. I think they're finding their way, and they're just kind of bumbling about, hoping that they find something. I think their best chance is probably for somebody on the right to mess up big. But right now, things seem to be going pretty well for the Republicans.
Speaking of that, President Trump on a roll. Jake Tapper had to admit, probably not a fan, probably didn't vote for him, but even old Jake had to admit it's been a pretty good stretch for President Trump.
For what may be empirically the best week of his presidency so far, a sweeping Supreme Court victory, expanding his powers, the Dow at a record high, ceasefires between Israel and Iran and in Rwanda. And now President Trump is focusing on his allies on Capitol Hill, where he hopes for another win.
Caroline Leavitt ticked off an even longer list of victories.
We are truly coming off a historic week of President Trump racking up win after win on behalf of the American people. President Trump restored peace through strength and acted decisively as commander-in-chief to obliterate the immediate threat of the Iranian regime's nuclear capabilities, and then brokered a ceasefire ceasefire between Israel and Iran, which continues to hold. Then, the president traveled to the Netherlands and achieved a monumental win for the United States and the NATO alliance by getting our allies to dedicate 5% of their GDPs to military spending. As a result of President Trump unleashing American energy dominance, summer gas prices are at the lowest they have been in 4 years, heading into the July 4th week. And with the incoming Trump economic boom, the stock market continues to roar back, with the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both hitting record highs.
Adam, I'm just so struck this week at Chuck Schumer saying we're all going to die versus Caroline Leavitt's messaging of all of that overwhelming success in their view. What do you think the American people see?
Yeah, I think it really is kind of that choice between life and death, to even go a little bit scriptural on you. And these are the two competing narratives. And I think most Americans, a clear majority, see Trump is on the right path. He's fighting for our country. And you're going to hear a little bit more about the start of these July 4th and the 250th year celebrations. And I do think that is going to turn a major tide in this country. And keep in mind, that goes up until July 4th, 2026. So when James Carville's talking about some kind of Democrat wave and a blowout in an election that will happen only a few months later, I think that's even more proof that they're wrong. They're on the wrong side of history. And barring some major collapse or scandal, I think Trump's riding a good wave. I think America's riding a good wave, and we're going to see a lot of momentum over these next 12 to 16 months.
In fact, President Trump travels to Iowa this weekend to kick off the 250th anniversary of the country. A year from now, he's kicking that off. And so, Melissa, my question is, to Adam's point, is patriotism back in style?
Oh, patriotism is back in style. Like, this is going to be the best 4th of July ever. And think back to where we were a year ago. What a difference a year makes. It's not just make America great again. He is making America great again, and we get to all be a part of it.
Josh, is that your vibe, that the American public sees that, no, we're not careening off a cliff, we're not all going to die, but in fact, good vibes abound?
I think so. I mean, there was a lot of tariff panic, and then it turned out, oh, it's okay. I think most Americans are seeing positive results. Jobs are up. Wages have actually outpaced inflation. That's been a big deal for Americans. Gas prices are down. The things that people feel daily are improving, and I think that's where, for most Americans, that's where they're going to put, their beliefs and their feelings.
And we go back to our old friend Harry Enton, who was just explaining that he was shocked at where Democrats were trending politically. He's also expressing his shock at where Republicans are overwhelmingly showing their support.
This isn't just Republicans who like Donald Trump. This is Republicans who love Donald Trump. And he's up like a rocket. Look at this. In July 2017, the strongly approved was 53%. That's pretty good. But look at where he is now. 63% of Republicans strongly approve of the job that Donald Trump is doing about 5 months into his presidency. Republicans love Donald Trump the way that Americans love Disney World. The bottom line is 63%. That is a huge, huge base. And of course, it's just part of a Republican base in which about 90% of them overall approve of him, including the somewhat approves as well.
It's just striking. And I'll close today with this, and that's, where are we as a country? To me, I just saw it coming into today's show. There's your line. Harry Enton talking about the things that Democrats love and cling to right now versus where the GOP is. The comparisons have never been more stark, Melissa.
I think it's what they've always been afraid of. Americans who love America. Shocker.
Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're seeing right now is a victory after victory from this administration, and it's getting actually hard for the left to come up with negative things to say. In fact, the Atlantic this week carried a piece that gave Trump props for what he did in Iran. And so it seems inevitable that you have to give him some credit. Like
Adam,
him or not.
Final thoughts, Adam, on this 4th of July?
Yeah, I mean, Trump is strong, and he's making America strong again. The Democrats appear weak. They don't have anything. I've said it before. They're not offering a better alternative. And I think people can see right through that. And remember, in the last election, a lot of traditional groups, Hispanics and black males and all these folks that have traditionally been heavily Democrat went for Trump. And I think he's winning over a lot of people because they see results.
Panel, thanks a lot, and a happy 4th of July. When we return, the Herzog Foundation, our parent company, has a message for you as we begin our year-long celebration of America's 250th birthday when the Lion Week in Review rolls on. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. If you missed any of today's show or you ever want to get caught up, you can always go to readlion.com and check out our social media as well as our YouTube channel. Hope that you will. As we wrap up on this 4th of July edition, we turn to the Herzog Foundation president, Daryl Jones. Our parent organization, the Herzog Foundation, is kicking off what we're calling Faith and Freedom 250. Here's Daryl Jones with more.
The story of the founding of our nation is unlike any other in the history of the world. We learn about it in school, but after that, we don't give it much thought in our everyday lives. The lessons learned through the trials and struggles, the sacrifices of thousands who believed in something more than themselves, and the ideals enshrined in our founding documents, and those that followed over 250 years, are all testaments to what it means to be an American. As we near the semi-quincentennial of the founding of the United States of America, there's no better time to revisit how it all happened. Not just the facts and personalities, but the philosophies and movements that aided in the establishment and preservation of our freedoms in society. It didn't happen by accident. Our nation is the result of very deliberate actions that define who we are and who we hope to be, as we have labored to form a more perfect union, in the words of the Constitution. Our founding fathers understood this and wrote about it extensively. They knew they were not embarking on this endeavor alone. They understood that they had a higher power to guide and aid them. George Washington called it divine providence. This year-long series leading up to the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence will celebrate the actions and ideals of our nation, its founders, and those who have continued to carry the torch throughout our history. It's not just a history lesson, but a discussion about timeless values and sacred changes that inspire us today. In that spirit, every generation over our long history has called upon a higher power to make history and to preserve and expand liberties and rights within our nation. Faith and Freedom 250 explores these ideals and the actions of a faithful people who established a new nation and preserved it through education and example for 250 years. Join us each week as we go back in history and revisit these topics. We hope to remind you of the events, shine new light on the stories, and inspire you to live your life holding firm to the convictions upon which this great nation was founded.